Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar at the Follicular Lymphoma Foundation on FLF and U, Emotional Health and Wellbeing. I'm Nick, and I'm the Research Manager of Patient Programs at the FLF. And thanks so much for joining us here today. We're really excited to have you with us. So this webinar is part of a series, and it takes place every other month on important FL topics. So please register your interest to stay updated, and I'll pop the link in the chat for that in a minute. The previous webinars can also be found on our support hub, and that link I'll also pop in the chat for you. So just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we plan to upload the video on our website, where only the speakers will be available. During the webinar, there is the chat box and the Q&A box. So please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box and really engage, and also put your questions throughout in the Q&A box, and we'll get back to them during the session. You can post your questions anonymously as well, and any questions that we don't get to during this session, then we'll communicate after the webinar and respond to them in different ways as well. We've got some live polls, so please do participate. And yeah, thank you so much for being here today, and over to you, Mitch.
Thanks, Nick. Yes, we appreciate everyone's attendance today, and if you're watching it later, your attendance then. So I'm Mitchell Smith. I'm the Chief Medical Officer of the Follicular Lymphoma Foundation, and this is one of a series of webinars, and this one is a topic that's come up quite a lot in our discussions with patients and caregivers about how you approach the anxiety of this diagnosis. So we're going to cover anxiety, we're going to cover emotions, we're going to cover how you deal with it and identify them, and also some strategies and learning about how to best manage them, and concepts of how we can deal with these things that frankly, as a physician, I often underestimated in patients and didn't deal with. So I think this is really important. And we have patients who have been through this and will be speaking today. So I think there's a couple of polls which will come up, and we'd love to have you your sense of that. We're getting to know the audience. The first one will be, how confident are you in managing your emotional health? Anything from uncertainty, anxiety, etc. So how confident are you? And the second poll, which I think is up there now, is what's the biggest challenge you face in managing your health? And we'll address some of these today, but we'd like to know which ones are most concerning for you. And if you put other and you want to put some note in the chat about, hey, I put other, but this is what I was thinking, we'd love to hear that, and we can try to address some of those issues during the webinar today. Now, as you doing that, I'd like to introduce our panelists. I'm really excited to have a diverse panel here of experts, patients, and caregivers. So I'm going to go around and ask them to introduce themselves briefly. First, I'm going to start with you, Carmen. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're here?
Sure. Thank you so much for the invitation. So my name is Carmen Hilton. I've been a behavioral health therapist for over 20 years. Right now I work at, the health systems at Life with Cancer. And so I've been practicing therapy and developing programs and helping to support our patients and their caregivers. And at Life with Cancer, we have numerous programs that we offer our patients, and they're all free of cost. So that is what I have been doing for the past several years.
Great. And Carmen, thank you. And she's a bit modest. She's invited speaker. She was at the American Society of Hematology meeting as an expert. So she's really quite experienced in this, and we're looking forward to her comments and input today. Nikki, tell us about yourself.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Nikki Greenhalgh. I was diagnosed with follicular lymphoma in 2014, and I was lucky to go on a clinical trial for a year, and quickly went into an NED. But then leaving the hospital, I struggled with a lot of depression and anxiety, and 12 months later, I felt the only way I could, feel better was to connect with other FL patients. So that's when I started the Living with Follicular Lymphoma Facebook group in, was it November 2015, so almost 10 years ago now. And when I did finish treatment, I I started to really look into nutrition and life, having a healthy lifestyle, and what we can do, what we can control, and how we can try and remain in remission. So I went on a quest and went back to university, and I graduated last year, and I'm now a clinical nutritionist, and I have a special interest in oncology and nutrition, obviously, so that is my focus, and I'm really excited to be here today to have a chat about nutrition as well. So thanks for having me.
Great, very inspiring what you can do, turn around your issues into something positive, both in the Facebook group and your career. So that's great news. Paul, next to you. I'm sorry, Ben. I'm reading this. I got. Right.
It's all right. No, it's fine, Mitch.
Ben, I'm sorry.
There was
reading my crib notes.
comfortable silence there. Yeah, no
Ben,
problem.
sorry, yes.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for the invitation, Mitch, and everyone at FLF. My name's Ben Johnson. Yeah, I'm a patient. I was diagnosed back in 2017. In 2018, I underwent some chemotherapy, which was about 3 months of RCHOP. Which then I responded well to and went into remission for about 5 years. Then I had some reoccurrence happen in late 2023. So in 2024, I underwent some further chemotherapy with rituximab and bendamustine. I always get that one wrong. Underwent that, responded again well to that treatment, and now I'm back in remission and just on some maintenance drugs. But when I was first diagnosed, I was very much of the mindset, how do I overcome the physical challenges that are now I'm about to go through? And it was really the physical side of it for me wasn't too bad because I was quite young and reasonably healthy with my fitness and nutrition, but the mental issues started to creep in after a couple of years of remission, also with COVID. I found myself in a terrible place mentally and not quite knowing or understanding how to manage that. And I hadn't developed any coping mechanisms. So I was able to reach out to various groups, change my nutrition, give up alcohol, things like that were really sort of took me on in a trajectory of really learning more about myself and understanding what mental health is. And today's sort of webinar, I think, is a great opportunity to talk about that. Thanks, Mitch.
Great, and thank you. I think we'll get back to you in a little bit about I think a really inspiring story again, how you really represent a lot of the things that many of the people on the webinar have been or are going through, and how you've turned that around, I think is very inspiring. And Leah, yeah.
Yes, thank you for inviting me to be here. I am the wife of Andrew McCaslin, who some of you may know from previous webinars. So he's my husband, and he was diagnosed in 2021 with follicular lymphoma, and it really hit us quite hard, mid-20s, and he's been through his ups and downs, and I've kind of learned how to support him in the best way I can, whilst also managing my own emotional health through your loved one, your partner, the person you're caring for being diagnosed. So I'm here to kind of talk about the caregiver side, and things that you can think about to do with your emotional health and well-being from that perspective.
Great, yeah, and there's a link in the chat to Andrew's story. It's on our patient stories section of the web, and if people go to our previous webinars, he was a star of one of those, and I'm sure Leah will be similarly inspiring today. So this is a preface. I want to say, there's a mix of people on the webinar. I'm sure there's a wide range of knowledge in the audience. This one is not technical and scientific, so I'm less concerned, but we may use some terms that you may not understand. Hopefully everyone's familiar with follicular lymphoma at some point if you're here. There are places on our website to go for a glossary of terms and knowledge, and on our support hub on the website, you can go to the webinars, the previous ones, which are stored there, an overview of FL. It talks about some of the latest treatments. And also remember that there's a wide geographic spread of people on the webinar, and some of the topics and things we talk about may or may not be as available to you. So some of the things may shift a little bit by country. All right, so getting to know the audience, a little more than half of the people are sort of in that mid-range, like, yeah, I can do it, but not perfect. I'm glad to see that no one is at 0 or 1, so that's encouraging. So people feel they have some control, but there's room for improvement. And what's the biggest challenge? Really, the largest one seems to be coping with uncertainty about the future. So we'll address some of those strategies you can have. And then the anxiety or stress related to treatment, isolated and misunderstood. Hopefully we'll address some of that isolation and make you feel part of a larger community. I know that's what one of Nikki's goals with the Facebook group was. And emotional health, again, as I mentioned, often underappreciated by your physicians, but sometimes there's other strategies for helping you deal with those. And how do you access emotional support and mental health support that you need? So a mix of things, and we'll try to address many or most of those topics as we go through. With that, oops, sorry, get that out there. So I think, you know, we're going to start out with Carmen, talking about what resources, well, before the what resources, how you deal with the emotional stress of this diagnosis. I know you deal with all cancers. Follicular lymphoma is a little different because it has that long, uncertain course. So I'm not going to take any of your time. I'm going to let you just go with it and tell us what you can do to help our viewers.
Sure. And thank you so much again for the invitation. And I'm hoping that all of the tips and strategies and techniques that I shared with you today are going to be helpful on your journey and to help you manage your anxiety or depression, and just give you some good tools to use when you're triggered or when you're feeling anxious and you don't know what to do, or when you're stressed out. So before I address the emotional strength and resilience, I just wanted to share a little bit about how emotions and emotional challenges can show up for some of our patients. So we know that our cancer patients can have these physical/health needs, but they also have emotional health needs. And oftentimes those emotional health needs are either dismissed or unaddressed. And so we find that with a cancer diagnosis, it's a life-changing event, as we know, and life-changing events can evoke a whole range of emotions, feelings, thoughts, and all of that can significantly and often negatively impact our mental health and our well-being. So when we talk about emotions, I was thinking about that a couple of days ago. So what are emotions? What do they feel like? How do they surface? What triggers them? So emotions are they're a natural part of us to begin with, right? It's something triggers us and we react in some kind of way, either stress or anger or sadness or anxiety. And some of the ways that emotions can show up for patients when they're going through this cancer journey. A lot of my patients will say, well, I feel anxious. I feel distressed. I have this intense fear, and often the fear is more about the unknown. And this is a big one, fear of recurrence. Because I'm fearful that this cancer is going to come back. There's distress, there's depression, there's grief and loss. A lot of times we associate grief, loss with the loss of a loved one, but oftentimes patients are grieving the loss of who they were prior to having cancer. They're grieving the loss of a job. They're grieving the loss of finances, the loss of relationships, the loss of being a part of their community. So how do we help our patients? So when we talk about emotional strength and resilience, we all have resilience. It is innate. This is something that's built into us. So how do we build on that emotional strength that we already have? So how do we strengthen our resilience? So we can do that by learning coping mechanisms, not just learning them, but really trying to practice them, so that when I'm feeling anxious or I don't even know that I'm anxious, but I'm feeling something sometimes we feel symptoms in our bodies, right? It might be a headache, or it might be a stomach pain, or it might be tension in our neck, and that's anxiety, but we don't know that that's what it is. So also learning to put a name to some of the symptoms and the emotions that you're feeling will be helpful in helping you to navigate and use the coping skills that you need. So I wanted to share a couple of coping mechanisms that we use at Life with Cancer. One of my favorite ones is called the power of the pause. So with the power of pausing, it's actually an acronym. It's called STOP, but this STOP has two P's. So the first stop, the first letter is S. So when you're feeling anxious or you're feeling stressed, you can stop, right? STOPP, it has two P's. The first letter is S. Stop means just pausing for a moment, saying it to yourself. I need to stop. My heart is racing. I don't know what's going on. As soon as you notice your mind and your body is reacting to a trigger or a stressful situation, and I'll talk about triggers in a moment, just stop. Be able to take that moment, remembering that you're pausing because you're recognizing that something is happening. And then with the T, it's when you stop or after you stop, take a deep breath. Notice how you're breathing in through your nose and breathing out through your mouth. And that can take place slowly. And you can take a couple of deep breaths. And then the O is after you've stopped and taken a deep breath, you should observe. What can you notice about why you had to stop? What can you notice about what was going on in your mind? What were some of the thoughts that were coming in? Can you notice it in your body as you stopped and as you paused, remembering that there's power in pausing? What did you notice in your body? What thoughts were going through your mind right now? Sometimes our thoughts can create those feelings of anxiety, and also can create stressful reactions. So what sensations are you noticing in your body? Again, as you stop, as you take a breath, and then as you observe what is going on. What am I thinking? Is this thought a fact, or is this just a thought? And then what is pulling back? The P would be after you've done that, you're still in a stopped motion. You're going to pull back and put in some perspective. Don't believe everything you think, right? But because not all of our thoughts are true or accurate. They're not facts. They're just thoughts. Think about what is the bigger picture here? What is another way of thinking about this situation that just triggered this anxiety or this stress? And then what if it were a friend that you were giving advice to in that moment, what advice would you give that friend? What would you take the same advice that you're giving your friend? And then the second P is practice what works for you. What is the best thing to do right now? Now you've stopped, you've taken a deep breath, you've paused, you've observed, you pulled back, you put things into perspective. Now, what is going to help you proceed, right? Practice what works for you. What's the best thing to do right now? What is the most helpful thing that you can do? What can you do that fits your values? Where can you focus your attention right now? And then do what will be effective for you. So remembering that there is power in pausing, stopping, just taking a pause, taking a deep breath, observing what's going on, putting things into perspective. And that can take all of maybe 5-7 minutes that are going to be worth it. So that's one of the strategies that you can use when you're feeling anxious and with anxiety, there's something that we call the cycle of anxiety. So that's a segue to this. It's a negative cycle of anxiety where we have an event that happens. So the event can be you get a cancer diagnosis. So automatically, you're going to have a thought, whatever that thought might be for you. Oh, am I going to live? What's going to happen? Am I going to lose my family? Will I lose my job? How will I pay for these things? And then as you're remember, it's an event that triggered a thought. And now that thought is triggering some feelings and some strong emotions. And you will feel those in your body. It might be a stomach ache. It might be a headache or a lower backache, as patients tell me. And then that triggers some physical reaction, our behaviors, right? We want to give up. We feel hopeless. What's going to happen? It's the unknown. So this negative cycle of anxiety, if you notice, there's a trigger, then there's the thought, there's the feeling of emotion, there's the body, the physical sensations, and then the behaviors. But at each point, you can stop. Remembering the power of the pause. When the event happens, you can stop, and you can practice how to reel that back in. You can practice stopping. You can practice observing, taking a deep breath, putting things into perspective, and then pausing helps you to choose the next step. Observe and figure out what is the next best step to manage this. So remembering that there is a negative cycle of anxiety, but it can be broken as you use specific coping mechanisms, specific tools. So there are a few, but I'll just go through one more. Well, two more. There's something that we use that we call building your own toolbox. And you may have heard this already, but in your toolbox, you can put in there anything that you feel you can reach for in that moment of anxiety, that moment of depression, the moment of sadness. And that can be, you can create your own coping mechanism cards. We have something called pocket coping cards. You can create your own way to cope. You can list several things on there. It can be, well, I'm feeling anxious. Who can I call? You list 3 people on there. I'm feeling anxious. What technique can I use? Can I do a mindfulness exercise? Can I go for a walk? Can I call one of my best friends? Should I check in with my support system? So you're going to create your own coping card. You can keep that with you. And also the stop technique, we have cards that you can carry in your wallet as reminders. So those are some of the things that you can put in your toolbox. It can be lotion, it can be scented, think cotton balls that you can have, anything that brings, that can help you relax. And we also use deep breathing. I highly recommend that. You can find many videos on YouTube. And the last thing, and journaling, I think is very, very powerful tool to use during the time that this cancer journey. You can write down some of the triggers that you're experiencing. And as you keep recording those triggers, you might be able to notice a pattern of where the triggers are coming from, what are those triggers, and how do I manage those? And then just to emphasize, triggers can be internal and they can be external. So the internal can be you feel a lump again, you can have pain, or your body aches, or you're having intrusive thinking that's creating this anxiety, or they can be external. So it's a matter of recognizing what are the triggers. Maybe a trigger for you is having to drive by the hospital after treatment and brings up all these memories about all of these appointments that I had. Maybe the trigger can be my scan results. Now I have to wait for scan results. Or there's so many external triggers, but recognizing what they are and then creating your own tools for managing that would be extremely helpful. And I'll wrap this one up with this. I have an acronym that I use for myself, and the word is CARE, C-A-R-E. So for me, C is I will make an effort to stay connected with my friends, with my family, with my support system. A is I will access as many resources as I can to help me understand this diagnosis. R is just finding relief. How do I find relief when I have these symptoms? And looking for ways to do that. And then E, I will make sure that I educate myself on what is happening with me for my future in the present. And that's my acronym. And you can develop your own. And I think that a lot of those tools would be helpful in managing some of the stressors.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack and
Yes.
covered a lot. And I think we can make some of those resources you mentioned available. I know they're available
Yes.
your your hospital web program, and we'll try to make those available. One thing I was struck by was the cycle of anxiety, because in follicular lymphoma we know that you can be in remission and you're sitting waiting for this something to come back, and any ache and pain, anxiety level, it just sort of feeds on itself. So that cycle is especially hard for FL patients because, as you say, a new lump might be because they got a cut and their lymph node is fighting it off, but the patient doesn't know that. And so I think those ideas, we'll address them, I think, with some of the other panelists, but particularly hard in FL, where your first thought is always, is this the disease back? And that just sort of feeds things. And so being able to take a deep breath and stop and those sorts of things, I think, are really critical. So Ben, hearing what Carmen had to say, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your story and how that fits in, some of that fits in, and the strategies that you've had, because I find your story quite inspirational. So
yeah, thanks, Mitch. I think Carmen, that was really helpful, and you used a lot of scary words there that at first, when I was diagnosed, I could completely relate to, but I didn't understand them. I didn't really understand what anxiety was, and as I touched on at the beginning, I looked to just deal with the physical effects and physical recovery, and didn't listen to or try to understand what the mental implications were. And it wasn't until a couple of years into remission that my mental health had got so bad that I was dwelling on so many of those anxieties and fears and emotions that it was it was a really tough time for me. And luckily, I was able to find the support networks to break that cycle and to start learning more about myself. And okay, why am I feeling this? Pausing and understanding what those thoughts and feelings and emotions were was something that I started to learn a lot about myself, really, as a person and with this disease, but also as a person. So there was a whole benefit of things that came with all of this new discovery. It was so, I mean, it's been so good for me that when I went to my first physical treatment, it was tough. When I came to the second treatment, it was a lot easier because I had that toolbox of things to help with the stages of that anxiety and that fear. They're still there, but I know now how to sort of just take a step back or check in with myself in the morning, or the apps, do a meditation, do some exercise, do some service, like raise some money for the FLF, and just do all the little things. And you don't have to do all of them. You could do one or two, but if you feel in yourself that you're improving that mental state, then it's such a massive step. It's been a real journey in that regard.
Mitch, may I say something to something that Ben said?
Please. Yep, absolutely.
Ben, when you talked about apps, we're people that we're always carrying our phones with us, right? They're our partners, so to speak. But there's so many different apps that can be downloaded that are so helpful, and I'll just throw a couple of them in. There's Calm, there's Headspace, there's iBreathe, Happify. So there's so many that people can download, and it's almost like having a therapist in your pocket. They're reminders of coping skills to use during those moments of stress and anxiety.
Yeah, I struck Ben by the idea that as anxiety provoking as the first treatment was, the second one, you had developed all these strategies, and it's still there, but you can manage them. And I think for the audience and the viewers, it's really important that you can do this. You can do this. People have done it, and it's achievable, and you have some control over this. And I think that's the key. Sometimes there's this sense that I don't have any control over any of this. It's just happening to me. And no, you can take control. I think a lot of the Carmen strategies and what Ben has done really show that. So now, we talked about apps. Our phone is our partner, but we're going to move over to Leah now because, hey, partners are really important. Now, not everyone has the benefit of a close partner, but if you do, then that's going to be your app and your mindfulness. But then we have to think about the partner and the stress that they go through and how they deal with it. And so, Leah, maybe you can tell us a little about your story and some of the things that have happened with you and what you can tell people that as strategies to help them.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. And it's been super interesting so far. So thanks, Ben and Carmen, for sharing your information and experience. In terms of being a caregiver, it's sometimes a bit of a battle because you're also going through all the anxiety and the stress and the fear of the unknown, in terms of from your perspective, but you're also needed to support the patient, and what they're going through. So it's kind of a bit of a double whammy in that sense. So with Andrew and I, we were really shocked. Andrew was, in his mid-20s, and we really didn't expect this, and it came at a really difficult time anyway, with some circumstances we were already in. And we we're both really struggling to cope because I was feeling got of stress and anxiety of making sure he was okay, supporting him physically through the treatment, but also mentally, whilst also really struggling with my own emotional health. And I felt myself burning out a little bit because I felt like I needed to be this big support to Andrew, and that was the priority, because he was the one going through this, and kind of just left my own emotions to deal with later. And that, quickly caught up with both of us. And I realized it was needed for me to step back at times and work out my own support network, my own ways of coping too, in order to be my best self for Andrew. So that's kind of our experience. If you want to be, you feel so helpless as a caregiver, and you want to be everything for your husband in my circumstance, but anyone you're caring for. But it is also really, really important it's not selfish to think about your own emotional health as well in that time. And it's okay to do so, because it feels, selfish at the start to think about that, but to be the best for them, you need to be okay in yourself as well. So I think that came with, realizations, practice, time, and understanding what we both needed to move through this together as a team. So it's not kind of an instant thing. It's more of an experience that's different for everyone. But I think I'm really here to say that if there are any caregivers on this webinar, that it is okay to look after yourself as well, and you need your own support network too.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And I think even for the patients who are dealing, have a caregiver, they can allow that. They can help allow them to say, oh, yes, it's okay if you go do your things. I understand you need to do that. So again, the partnership is key in the communication, your needs. And what struck, we always talk about the patient journey, and I'm hearing from Ben and Lee and Andrew that it is a journey, and it can be, obviously no one wants this diagnosis, but you can have some positive aspects out of it, and turn that around a little bit. So I think those are key. Again, so I want to. Nikki's been very quiet over there because we've been ignoring her, but now we're going to bring her into the fray here. So you have two roles here, but we're going to start with the nutrition one, and I'm going to start with, there's a question or a comment in the chat, or in the Q&A from Claire, who's talking about, my doctor says there's no evidence that nutrition or lifestyle measures do anything, but I want some control. And as a physician, I would usually tell patients, hey, you should do anything we tell you to do to stay healthy. You should really do. Like most of us don't, but you should really do that. You should, watch your diet and exercise and eat right. But the doctor is in some sense right. There's not a lot of science behind that, but we do know that the best way to maintain your health and your immune system's health is to do the things we always advise. So you focused on nutrition, so maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you came to that, and some thoughts about what patients can do in that area.
Absolutely. And I'm very excited to also answer that question that you mentioned. It absolutely plays a huge role, in my opinion, because food provides the building blocks to build all the proteins and hormones, transmitters, lots of things in our body. So it's the food that we put in our mouth is absolutely crucial to improving our quality of life, supporting our energy levels, our immunity, our overall well-being, and that does include our emotional health as well. A lot of people don't realize is the connection between the gut and the brain. We have a super highway between the gut and the brain called the vagus nerve. And a lot of hormones are actually produced in our gut, particularly the happy hormone, serotonin. So serotonin helps to regulate our mood and our sleep and our stress. And 90% of this hormone is produced in the gut. So also, particularly our gut microbiome is really important to nourish and keep as healthy as we can. So it does, so those processes can work smoothly. So so it is. I truly believe that nutrition plays a very crucial role in all of these things. So we get a lot of questions in the group. What foods do we focus on? And obviously everyone's different, and it does help to work with a nutritional practitioner to work out your own individual plan. But on a general level, the focus should be anti-inflammatory foods, nutrient-dense foods. These are really good at managing symptoms, reducing treatment side effects, and also supporting our emotional health and resilience. So what do these foods look like? So we're talking about colourful fruit and vegetables. I always tell my clients to aim for at least 40 different plant foods per week, because the variety is such a huge thing as well, because there's so many antioxidants in all of these foods, and particularly the colours, bright colour fruit and veg. I always say eat the colour of the rainbow, because it's just full of so many beautiful things. And other great foods are lean proteins, eggs, fish, yogurt, chicken. They're full of great proteins. Whole grains like brown rice, oats, and quinoa. Quinoa is also an amazing power food. It contains all the essential amino acids, so it is actually a complete protein. And then also healthy fats like nuts and seeds and oils. These foods are vital for reducing inflammation, particularly in the brain as well. So, and on top of that, hydration is the key as well, because even mild hydration can actually worsen fatigue and nausea and create a lot of brain fog as well. So those are the foods that you really want to focus on, and to help that gut microbiome remain, become as healthy. And there is evidence out there that's starting to emerge that starting treatment with a really good, healthy gut microbiome can improve your health outcomes. So this is why this is so important, and everyone should take note. So how do we keep our gut microbiome healthy, or make it healthy? And the gut microbiome is basically the balance of the good bacteria in our digestive system. And this has a major influence on the processes. It keeps our gut lining nourished and able to absorb nutrients really well. So to support this, we want to eat really fiber-rich foods that will feed the good bacteria. This will in turn reduce the inflammation and support the brain function. And then also to balance the gut bacteria, we can have fermented foods like yogurt and sauerkraut, kefir. These have been linked to lower rates of anxiety and depression. So the research is out there. But I do want to point out when patients that are in treatment, I do tell my clients to avoid probiotics during treatment, only because it can increase the risk of infection and sepsis. So particularly patients that have ports implanted, they are particularly at high risk. Even just touching a probiotic tablet and touching your port, that can be associated with infection in the bloodstream. So I felt that was important to point out. I do also want to point out some practical strategies just for managing some of the side effects that come with treatment, particularly like nausea, fatigue, and loss of appetite. When it comes to fatigue, you want to include a lot of protein and fiber to help slow down the carbohydrates in your food, which will help you to sustain your energy levels. Omega-3 fatty acids are really great. So oily fishes, walnuts, and flax seeds. These are really great for your brain function and reducing inflammation-related fatigue. And nausea. So just some strategies for managing your nausea would be to have smaller meals rather than the large meals. Sometimes it can be a little overwhelming to have a big plate of food. So just lots of little small meals that can be really good for nausea. I always recommend herbal teas. Herbal teas are amazing. They're very hydrating. And the ones to focus on for nausea would be ginger and peppermint. And also those plain foods like crackers and toast, and eating foods that are cold or room temperature appears to be more tolerated than hot food that I've found. And then finally, low appetite. So this is a lot of people struggle with this during treatment. They don't feel like eating, and you're really at high risk of muscle loss. So I always recommend people to just make sure you're having lots of smoothies and soups and broths. This is a really good way to get those essential vitamins and minerals without the overwhelming feeling of actually eating and chewing and swallowing. It can be difficult, particularly if you have lots of mouth ulcers and things like that. But when you're making the smoothies and things, make sure you're including lots of protein sources in these things like Greek yogurt or nut butter. Even some soft tofu is really good as well. It just balances it out. So when we nourish our bodies properly, we're also nourishing our minds. So it's important to remember that. And also having these balanced meals will stabilize our blood sugar and our hormones. And that in turn does help to reduce mood swings as well. And there's just some key nutrients that are really good for managing stress and anxiety. Magnesium, which we can find in leafy greens and nuts and seeds. And also B vitamins are really important, really good for stress and reducing the anxiety. And we can find these in animal proteins and whole grains. So yeah, really ultimately nutrition, it's about nourishing, not depriving your body. It's about finding what works for you, making those small manageable changes to support both your physical and your emotional health. So that's why I feel it's really important to work with a nutritional practitioner, because they can help to support you making these changes, and they appears to be a really good key. So be kind to yourself, because food should always be a source of comfort. It shouldn't be pressure. It should be nourishing and make you feel good. And yeah, so that's what I wanted to say about that, and I hope there's some information there that can help some people.
Great. Yeah, a lot there. And again, it's a whole topic to discuss there.
Yes, I'm hoping we can do a whole webinar on this, Mitch.
Exactly. Well, I think we're going to ask that of people later, what they want to hear about, and we may want to expand that. So Ben, when we talked earlier, you talked about nutrition. You also talked about activity and mental support. I wonder if you just sort of, Bill, Nikki's covered the dietitian part of it, but what are those other areas that you really particularly found helpful in your journey?
Was that me, Mitch?
That was for you, yeah.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah. So
exercise and
yeah. So I think Margaret in the chat talks about acceptance, and for me, I just wanted to go back to my normal life. I didn't want to have this thing hanging over me and the thought in the back of my mind that was there every single day. And when I realized that I couldn't go back to that life, and that I accepted this condition, a weight lifted off my shoulders, and it unlocked the next steps going forward to try and find things to support a change in my life, and that change was on nutrition. That change was on the things I talked about earlier with helping out others, finding a voice. I was a terrible communicator. I just suppressed everything. But I started to speak out, speak up, and for some people that's a real challenge. But it doesn't have to be to anyone and everyone. It can be to a family member, a loved one. It can be to fellow patients through the great work that Nikki does with the Living with Follicular Lymphoma Facebook page. You can find small ways to find that voice, and that I think just the little things like that really do help.
Okay. Carmen, I want to come back to you for a minute. So, Ben managed to do this. But not everyone can do this by themselves, and they need help. Some people are shy or embarrassed about asking for help, especially mental health support. I wonder if you could just spend a minute or two talking about the benefits or the access and how someone would go about getting mental health support.
Sure. I think just being able to find their voice again, because when you get a diagnosis, you're going through treatment, and so many different things are happening. The patient's voice tends to get muffled. So I would strongly encourage you to share with your provider when you're feeling. If your provider will not know that you are feeling anxious or depressed or you need help, and the help can be maybe outside resources or financial assistance to pay for the medical bills or something like that, but find your voice again in all of this. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to tell your provider what's going on. Don't be afraid to ask to speak to someone, as Ben was saying. Speak to, I don't know, the programs that people attend, but in most programs, you may have a social worker, there can already be a therapist, a mental health provider. Seek them out, because it's going to be beneficial to help you get through what you're going through. And I also noted that Margaret, as you did, Ben, Margaret talked about acceptance. It's accepting this, and then I think when people are not able to accept that, it keeps them from moving forward because they're stuck there. But when you're able to accept, okay, I have this, so now I accepted it, but then now what do I need to do to get better? What goals can I set to help myself? So I think just looking at that whole holistic picture, mainly reaching out to someone. You do not have to go through this by yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a key message. It's hard enough, and doing it by yourself is difficult. Ask for that support. It could be, a group. It could be a mental health counselor.
Right.
Could be, and then Leah, perhaps you can talk a little bit more about support for you and or as a caregiver, and how that melds into support for the patient. Do you get it together? Do you get separate? How might that work?
Yeah, are you kind of referring to nutritional
I was thinking
support,
more
or
of the
just in
mental health
general
aspects, actually,
of
to be
mental
honest
health?
with you. Yeah.
Yeah,
The support systems, yeah.
yeah. So I think very quickly I learned that I needed my own separate support system, that when I was speaking to them, it would be, how are you, Leah? Rather than we quickly went straight to talking about, how Andrew was doing, what was happening with him. And, both myself and my support network were kind of consumed with that. And that's kind of where my emotional health started to deteriorate as Andrew went through treatment, because I, was suffering my own emotions but not addressing them. So we quickly learned that there needed to be some time where I speak to certain people about how I was doing to support me best, to then support Andrew better. So I think ensuring that you have your own support network of 1, 2 people, even journaling, just to spend time on how you're feeling and really acknowledge that and address that, because the more it's swept under the carpet, in my circumstance, the more it kind of creeps back up on you, and then you're both left in difficult situations further down the line. So I think making sure you've got that support network, whatever that might be, and also having that open communication between you and the person you're caring for, in why you might need that time. It's so that you can support them best, and also what can you do as the caregiver to help them. For instance, for Andrew and I did a lot, or I spent a lot of time on the Facebook group, thank you, Nikki, which was really informative. I did the research, I looked into the treatments, I was very involved in the decision making, speak to the consultants, because Andrew wanted to spend time on his physical health. And so that was where I could feel helpful, which was really good for my mental health when it's a position as a caregiver where you feel helpless. And also it was great because I could take that load off Andrew. It was something I could do. So we were both feeling good about that. So later down the line, we switched those roles up a little bit of who would take on what. So I think as a caregiver, creating your own support network and, you know, some of the stuff that Carmen brought in on ways to support yourself in moments of anxiety as well, they're absolutely fantastic. But also that connection, it can be a really isolating situation you're in. And then also, you know, that open communication with the person you're caring for and how you can both, you know, work out your roles and move through this period the best you can whilst in treatment.
Great. So what we're hearing is that communication is important, both for the patient, the caregiver, and that interaction. And you have to carve out time for your health to optimally support him. So that brings us to patients who don't have adequate support or might need more support or are always looking for more support. And Nikki, that led you to the Facebook, really the Living with Facebook group, which the link is now in the chat. But I just want you to talk a little bit about that. But there's an interesting in the Q&A, someone who says, "Yeah, thanks for this, but you know, it's sort of triggering because all these people are talking about all their problems." And so one of the things that might be, when's the right time to join it, make it work for you? You know, sometimes people in remission don't want to be reminded of it and leave it alone, and that's okay. But so maybe tell us a little bit about Facebook group and how your thoughts are on how that works and how it's right for the right people at the right time.
Yeah, sure. As you all know, this community is very, very close to my heart because it's exactly what I needed, particularly after treatment. When I left the hospital to get back to my normal life, I had to try and learn to get my head around the incurable part of the disease, as we all do. And the connection with other patients was what did it for me. So, well, I knew that, and so that's why I created the space. I felt like I looked for a community like this, and there was a gap there. So that's why I created it, and I wanted it to be a space where FL patients can come together and share their experiences and support one another. Because while doctors, they focus on treating the disease, it's only those of us who are truly living with the disease who understand the day-to-day challenges of it. So I knew in myself the only thing that would help me was connecting with other patients. So yeah, so I'm very, very proud of it. But I completely understand people who are hesitant to join. It can, you know, some people worry that it can feel overwhelming or negative. But what I've seen is the complete opposite. It's very uplifting. It's empowering, and we're very focused on solutions. So we're so lucky to have the FLF supporting us and helping to provide us with these resources. So I think that makes us very unique compared to other Facebook groups. Yeah, so just, you know, if you are hesitant to join, just join and simply read and use the search function. It's very handy. And then when you feel a bit more confident, you might want to do a little bit more. Yeah, so but for everyone else, if you're wanting to make the most of the group, ask lots of questions, because there's always somebody, it doesn't matter the day or night, there's always someone there to talk to you. And that's really powerful and useful. And share your journey, share your story with the FLF, or even just write it in the community, and you'll get instant responses, and you know, you'll get that emotional validation, which I think is really important, because some days are really tough and you just want someone to say, "I understand." You know, it can make a world of difference. So yeah, I think yeah, it's very powerful, and we should be, I think we're all using it, and it's a great resource for everyone, and I'm very proud.
Yeah, I think, you know, but what we found in some of our surveys was that there's people who want to know everything all the time, and there's other people who, I don't want to know when I don't need to know. I'll, you know, if my disease acts up, I'll go on, and this allows you to do that if and when you want. So there's the flexibility, which I think is key. And we do have a patient stories on our website. So anyone who wants to share their story, let us know, and we can work on getting that. I know we're getting short on time. Carmen, I wanted to come back to you. We've heard a lot today, and spend a little minute or two what did you hear? Anything that surprised you? What's your perspective? What do you want to emphasize?
Sure. So first of all, I just listening to everyone, to Leah, to Ben, to Nikki, thank you so much for sharing, everything that you shared, especially the Ben and Leah. Leah, when you talked about the caregiver and what they go through, sometimes they're the forgotten person, they're in the background, and how much support they really need. So thank you for sharing that. That's one of the things that stood out to me. And even in the questions, the chat, and just how important it is to have a healthy mindset, and that to keep your emotions to have healthy emotions, and keep your mindset and state of mind healthy in a healthy way. That's what I would say. Just work on things that can help you stay healthy mentally. That's important.
Great. So Nick, if you could put we're going to come back to the polls and see if we've get any change in how confident you are about emotional health would be one poll. And the second one is going to ask what webinar topics you would want to hear more about, because we will have one in March, and we are looking for your ideas. We want to do what you want to hear. And if it's more about nutrition, more about anxiety of watching weight, whatever, or more medical, treatment things that we haven't covered yet, please let us know. We're anxious to hear about that, either now or, send us an email or contact us through the website. Oh yeah, the first poll is up on, how confident you feel about managing your emotional health. So we'd appreciate your taking a minute to answer that. While that's up, I do want to thank all our panelists. This has been spectacular, and clearly we could spend another hour or two or a day on all these topics. But hopefully you've learned something about, how number one, that you're not alone. Number two, whatever you're feeling, other people have felt, and that there are ways to get around it or improve it, not to make it go away, but manage it. And I think this is the way, to move forward. And we're all faced with stresses in life, and that we manage of all sorts. And this is obviously a big one. So it looks like in the webinar poll, we've definitely helped people. Now almost 2/3 of people are feeling number 4. And so that's good. So we've helped some people at least, which I think is positive. And the other poll on what you want to hear, what you're interested in hearing more of, will be up. And I'm just gonna, I think I've covered all of that. Oh yes, we definitely want to thank our sponsors. This wouldn't happen without obviously the kind donation of their time and effort to our panelists. But also we do get some support, and I think there's a slide up. Well, let's get this poll. I'm sorry, we'll let the poll go. Upcoming webinar topics, and please feel free to put in anything else that you would like to hear us talk about. This is a series, so if we don't do it in March, we can take that under advisement for later in the year. There will be an automated survey at the end, which pops up. We'd appreciate your talking frankly about what we can do better as we do these seminars and webinars. I do want to thank you all for attending. We thank the companies listed there for their support. They're all interested in patient education and patient and caregiver support. So we thank them for that. And as I say, in March, we'll be doing whatever topic we've come up with from listening to you. And every couple months, we'll be doing these. We look forward to your support. They are all posted, so you can tell your friends about them, and they can come and listen at their leisure. And with that, I'll turn it back to Nick for any final housekeeping details. And we're right on time, which is hard to believe. We didn't have a specific Q&A session because the discussion was pretty active, but I think we covered most of the questions that people had. There were a few specific outcome questions, which actually are dealt with in some of the earlier webinars, and we're happy to do those going forward. And it's great to hear everyone positive comments, so we're good. Thank you all. Thanks all the panelists. Thank our supporters, and thank all our viewers. And hope to see you in 2 months.